Well, John, we're in one of the galleries here. Kind of explain where we are and what stories are being told here.
Yeah, so this is the first really big gallery as you walk in the museum. We've got our stories of World War I and the Polar Bear Regiment, but we also have stories before that, the Spanish-American War, right? So there are a lot of really amazing stories, but the ones that most people are interested in is the Polar Bear Regiment. The Polar Bears in World War I were the only Americans ever to fight Russians on Russian soil. And nobody knows those stories, hardly at all, unless you come to the museum. Most of those guys came out of Camp Custer over in Battle Creek, and they ended up going over to England, and where they got pulled out of the division that they were in. They thought they were going to go south into France and fight the Germans, but instead they trained in an international force under British command, so with the British, the Canadians, and the French, and then they jumped on ships and went north around Norway, Sweden, and Finland, dropped into the White Russian Sea, and there at the port of Archangel, they got out and they ended up fighting Bolsheviks.
Oh, wow.
So the Russians, who were our allies early in the war, due to the Russian Revolution, the Reds, the Bolsheviks, ended up taking over large swaths and sued for peace with the Germans. And so then we went there to get back the weapons and things that were sold to the Russians.
Yeah, well, while we're here, what is Sergeant Alfred Larson's story here?
So he was with the 339th Infantry, the guys that went up to North Russia, and it was just and it was super unfortunate. Those guys that went up there, they had an absolute horrible time. They get there on the 4th of September. And by the 5th of September, they're ordered to get off the ship and go up either the railroads or down the rivers to try to catch up with the weapons that had disappeared from Archangel by that time. And so these guys would travel hundreds of miles, and by the middle of October, they were frozen, right? They were starting to be, the weather was extremely cold, and they didn't have time when they got off the ships to get their luggage and stuff, right? So the duffel bags, all that stuff stayed on the ship, and it caught up with them later. So near the end of October, that stuff shows up, and they go to get their winter stuff out, and they realize the guys that were unloading those ships, they actually stole that stuff and they sold it on the black market. So these men, they had their summer uniforms, and then they traded for local furs and garments to try to stay warm that winter. But we were talking over that winter of 1918, 1919, they would have recorded temperatures between 60 and 80 below.